Hey everybody, this is Tali Berman, autism specialist and author, part of the Whole Child team, along with
Roni Entenvistoker, individualized biomedical nutritionist. Hi.
hello everybody. We are two of the four members of the Whole Child team, along with Patsy, who is a registered nurse practitioner, and Dr. David Berger, who is a board certified pediatrician. And today we are on our third and final session of our summer session video series, which is a Q&A series where you have submitted questions, and then we've gone through the questions and picked the ones that we felt we're getting most often, that were relevant to the most people, so we can help you in the most effective way. So today is our third, and we can just dive in. We're going to take turns sort of answering questions, depending on if it applies to your specific area of expertise, Ronnie, or my specific area of expertise. Well, actually, that first one is mine, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's take that first one. So here is the first question from our third summer session video. And the question comes from Rebecca from the US, I think Arkansas, if I'm not mistaken. And she has a child who's 7 years old. And her question is, how can I stop him from saying, shut up? We don't say it in our home, but he seemed to have picked it up and I can't get rid of it. And one of the questions we ask in our survey is there anything you think we need to know to help us best answer your question, like context, history, or anything you've already tried? And she said, I've taken things away, I've turned off the TV, and I've put him in his room, but nothing really seems to help. So now, of course, this might seem like a really super nuanced question for kids who are saying, shut up, but I'm going to address it in a way that's for any child who's doing any behavior that seems provocative in some way, it seems challenging in some way, that you are hopefully trying to diminish, decrease, or extinguish in some way. So this can really relate to many, many different kinds of situations. And I actually have another story in my mind of a family who contacted me. I was working with them ongoingly, and they had a little girl who started putting her middle finger up. Right? So she was sticking her finger up. Now what happened was interesting is that she had her stem was sort of flickering her fingers like this. And in one situation she was doing that, and I guess made that gesture unknowingly and got this really big response, right? That she was sticking her finger up at somebody. And from that point on, she started sticking her finger up at everybody. And the parents were really concerned. She was getting a lot of negative attention around it. The family members who were coming over were offended. It became into this big mess. And it's very similar to the situation of this kid saying, shut up, right? What I directed her to do is what I'm going to talk about here in a bigger way, which is the importance of giving a lot of attention to the things that you want your child to continue to do or to do more of, and then giving very little, if no attention to the things you're hoping that your child will do less of. Meaning, this particular girl or this boy who's saying shut up is not being malicious or is out to get you, but simply finds it exciting, interesting when there is a big reaction, right? Especially for kids who don't have a lot of control. When they can begin to see a predictable setup like that, I do something, I get a big reaction, and it happens the same way every time, that's alluring. That's going to only encourage a child to do it more. And so giving that big reaction actually ends up working against your ultimate goal, because instead of helping a child do it less, it snowballs into a thing where they just becomes really exciting and they end up doing it even more. So I think the same guidance really comes here, because clearly what you've tried is turning off the TV, sending him to his room, giving him these big responses and reactions haven't worked. So my suggestion would be try doing nothing, but like really nothing, like not feeling anything. Because your kids will even know if you have like that tight face or like your voice changes, there's still a reaction they're getting from that. So the importance of really being non-reactive, because if your child's not getting anything from it, you just will have no reason to continue to do it. And I think if you can do that consistently, and not only that, anyone in his environment is doing that consistently. So if he doesn't get a reaction at home but goes to school and the staff is responding in a big way still, it's going to take much longer for him to sort of fade that behavior out. So that's something I want to make sure is consistent across the board as much as possible. Staff members, family members, give it like a 2-week period where everyone decides as a team, as a strategy, we're not going to do anything, we're not going to say anything, we're going to totally let it ride out. And I would be very surprised if in 2 weeks' time he is still saying shut up. So that's the overall concept that can be applied to so many different kinds of situations. And with this mom, with this child who was sticking her middle finger up, that behavior totally ended. I mean, that's all it took was just, what's that?
So did it take about 2 weeks for that to go away?
Less, way less. It usually takes way less than that. But as soon as the kid sees like, oh, that's not fun anymore, like I'm not getting that reaction, they just move on, right? But you're feeding it. Unknowingly, you're feeding it. So that would be my thought, is try the one thing that seems like it hasn't been tried yet, which is consistent non-reaction to that behavior, and I think you're on your way.
Great tip. Okay, so we move on to question 2?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. So question number 2 comes from, I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly, Brina from Israel. And this is regarding a child who is 4 years old. The question originally pertained to 2. We're going to talk about the first half. One child that she's working with has a very limited diet and eats only apple and pear for breakfast and frankfurters for lunch. She's asking, how can we increase this child's desire for choice, for food diversity? So this is a great question, and I think I'll do the same, Tali. I think this relates to food selectivity or picky eating, which is a very common question. And it comes in all different forms. In this case, it's these 2 fruits for breakfast and a meat for lunch. A lot of times it can be, pizza and French fries or pretzels and popcorn, that kind of thing. So it's just something that definitely comes up a lot. And I think the best way to approach it is really to take a step back and try and identify what the root cause is of the selectivity or the picky eating. So it's really important to ask, first of all, if there's a medical issue that might be contributing to the selectivity or the picky eating. A lot of times there's food allergies or sensitivities in place. There might be gastrointestinal issues that are causing a child to select certain foods or limit themselves. So very important to evaluate that, especially if there's signs of, reflux or posturing, or discomfort during eating. Important to evaluate that. If it's going on, definitely to seek out a physician, whether it's a pediatrician or a gastroenterologist, to get to the bottom of that and treat it properly. So it could be a medical issue. Sometimes it's a sensory origin. So it might be texture related. This child, could be coming from liking crunchy foods. Other kids prefer pureed foods. So trying to figure out, is it coming from a sensory place? That can help to expand and get to the root cause. Or is it behavioral? Sometimes there's a behavioral issue that's causing a child to be picky or food selective. So really important as step 1 to try and identify where it's coming from. From my perspective also, there's sometimes biomedical causes. So it could be, like I said, a sensitivity that a doctor won't necessarily explore. Or sometimes a deficiency, like a deficiency of a mineral that's causing food selectivity or pickiness. So important also to assess that. And then based on whatever you can figure out the root cause to be, coming up with a plan based on that is really the way to go. So again, treating the underlying medical issue. If it's sensory, working with somebody who can help to get through either the hyposensory or the hypersensory situation. And again, if it's behavioral, treating it from a behavioral perspective.
Can you give an example of what that would look like? Like treating it from a behavioral perspective. What that would mean?
For example, if we find out that it's a sensory issue, and like I said, child likes to eat crunchy foods, then we could come up with ways to offer more foods from a texture that he prefers, and slowly chain that out to other foods. Sometimes kids who really like pears and apples will be willing to eat other foods with pears and apples inside them, and not just the pear and apple. So there's ways to kind of bridge and chain those to other foods and slowly expand the repertoire.
Yeah, and I want to just add, this is from actually a family that we're working with together, from the sensory perspective, that it's, texture is one piece of the sensory perspective, but one of the families we're working on diet expansion is also sort of visually sensitive, right?
Yes.
So fruits and vegetables that look really different, that have really vibrant colors, will immediately just sort of flick away. But what we just discovered is when the vegetables are roasted and have sort of like a brownish color, more similar to things he is willing to eat, like hamburgers, or meat that he's more willing to eat, then that's really been a nice bridge for him. I think it's important to think about the texture and also how are the other senses involved in terms of the smell or in terms of the way food might look, and how we
Or
can
temperature.
yeah, our temperature. Exactly. Interesting. Great. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that, Roni?
I think that's a good place to start. Obviously, this is very individual, very personalized, so we could go on and on, but I think we'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right. Great. I just want to open this up. All right. So the last question we're going to answer today is an interesting one. This is from Melissa from North Carolina. She has a child who's 13 years old, and she asks, can you address the body-brain disconnect issue with nonverbal autistics? And she continues to say, my son is only able to perform certain tasks on a very limited basis. He is not always accurate selecting the correct letters on a letterboard, but he is able to spell. Now, this is a topic that I think is becoming more and more well known, the whole idea that there is a brain-body disconnect, that especially people with autism who are minimally verbal or nonverbal, who then use letterboards or typing to communicate, who express that they understand, they know, they got it all in their mind, and their challenge is actually manifesting it with their bodies, making those right choices, demonstrating their knowledge, getting their bodies to respond to the messages that their brains are sending. And then that's really the challenge, which is such an important perspective to understand. And I think in many ways so different than how people understood autism for so long, because the assumption was, well, if he can't point to the right answer, he must not know the right answer. But actually the intelligence in many, many situations is there, but he can't point to the right answer because he can't get his body to point. But in his mind, he's saying, I know which is the circle, I know where my nose is, I know all these things. And so there's a lot of frustration that lies within that. Now, this is not my specific area of expertise in terms of knowing and understanding more about the foundations around that and why that occurs. But I will say there's been a lot of really amazing progress, both with families we work with and otherwise, of children really growing the ability to form that kind of connection over time, to become more skilled and more savvy with getting their bodies to follow the directions of their minds and having that kind of control, which can help them with daily life skills, but also in terms of communicating if you're trying to use typing as a way to communicate. So one thing I'll say about that is the importance of really engaging your child in activities that will help them do that. One of the activities that's been really interesting is rock climbing in general, because it requires a lot of organization, spatial organization, and really understanding and getting your body to move in particular ways to reach particular goals. And it's a great way to sort of train that connection to happen, to build those pathways that can then benefit a child in many other ways. Lots of physical exercise activities are great that way, where they're trying to do something new that they haven't done before, so they're having to really get their bodies to respond in that way. So that might be an activity to look into if you haven't looked into it yet. But I also want to sort of mention the idea of what is called, and I'm just going to go through it right now, the prompt hierarchy, which means trying to really help your child, picking a specific activity, a specific way that you're wanting your child to respond, and then really honing that over time and feeding the prompts over time to help your child be as independent as that is possible. I'm just referencing, if you look up prompting hierarchy anywhere on the internet, you'll get a whole list of what the hierarchy is. But basically, it starts with full physical prompting, really actually physically helping your child do what it is you're wanting him to do. So for example, it might be grabbing a spoon or grabbing a cup, actually doing it hand over hand with your child. Full physical, and then partial physical. So you might be still aiding your child physically to do it, but with a little bit less of that physical prompting, allowing him to grow a little bit more in his independence. There's modeling, so then I do it, and then he copies. Gestural prompting of really just sort of showing and pointing to what it is that needs to happen. Okay, here's your hand, there's the spoon, and really showing the way without actually being physically involved. Verbal, which is really directing your child. Okay, here's what needs to happen now. Sometimes a lot of these kids have a hard time just initiating that activity, and by giving them direct verbal prompting can really help get their body to respond in that way. And the last is visual, using things like pictures or cards to really help a child remember and remind their bodies what it is they need to do whatever tasks that it is that they're doing. And if you have that prompt hierarchy in place, it can really help you take a specific activity, start from the beginning, and really help your child build the success and confidence over time to do that activity more independently. And in that process, besides learning that particular task, they are rewiring their brains. They are creating new pathways so that your child can further that connection between his brain and his body, which will manifest again in daily life tasks, but also doing things like being able to point more effectively, more successfully at a board or a keyboard or a letterboard. This takes time, and it takes practice, and it takes patience, but most importantly, it takes the child knowing that they're with someone who believes that they can do it, and setting them up in successful ways that they can do it to really begin to hone those skills. But what we know more than ever before is that the brain has plasticity and can grow and can change in ways that many people thought wasn't possible. So those are some ways. I hope that was helpful for you in how to begin to develop those skills to really strengthen those muscles of the brain-body disconnect that we see with a lot of kids on the autism spectrum. That is our third question of our summer sessions video. And before I wrap up, Ronnie, is there anything else you'd like to add or say?
No, just want to thank everybody as usual for tuning in, and of course for sending the interesting questions throughout the summer sessions. It's been really fun and really interesting.
Yeah, so thank you for your questions. And just a final reminder that we still have until August 1st, we are offering a $250 discount for anyone who would like to save their spot in our 4-month whole child coaching package, which gives you an opportunity to work with the two of us and get the therapeutic interventions along with the biomedical interventions. Some of them you mentioned, for example, that someone might explore during peak eating, along with Dr. Berger and Patsy, the nurse and doctor on our team. So if you're interested in that, the link to our website will be below, and you can just fill out the short application, and then we will sort of take it from there. That's it. It was a great being here with you, Brony, and great opportunity to answer everyone's questions. And we hope you have a great rest of the day.
Happy summer, everyone.
Take care. Bye.